call this meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission to order. We're going to start today with our regular agenda. The first item on the regular agenda is a rezone petition. To consider a rezoning petition from agricultural to community commercial for public safety center generally located in the northwest quadrant of State Avenue and the 21st Street West. The site is approximately 9 acres. This time I'm going to ask the party presenting, please.
Mr. Chairman, I'll go ahead and present that. That is a city petition. The rezoning petition that we do have advertised is for community commercial. However, after further consultation, we're going to reduce the zone on that or decrease the intensity of the zone to limited commercial. We can do that per noticing requirements because it's less intensive. It would actually be the benefit to the property owners around it. It further restricts the property with respect to outside storage. We have no intentions of doing outside storage for the public safety facility. With that being said, the motion will actually be from ag to limited commercial instead of community commercial.
Thank you, Mr. Corton. This time I'd ask if there's anyone in the public who would like to make comment on this, feel free to come forward. Glad to hear your comments. Does that mean that you will not be putting the trees in?
No, we will be putting the trees in. I will have that as part of an agreement for the final plat. If you want to put that as a condition to memorialize it, that we will put in evergreen and deciduous trees along State Avenue. The reason for the rezone is because the agricultural zone has a 35-foot setback before you can have the parking lot. We would like to move the parking lot closer to State Avenue in order for us not to encroach within that floodplain. In order to do that, we need to rezone the property to do so. As a concession to that, the city will put in evergreen and deciduous trees along State Avenue to soften the appearance of the parking lot.
Thank you, Mr. Corton. Anyone from the commission wish to make comment?
Mr. Chairman, Ed, are there any
Okay.
drainage issues on that piece of property? Water, stormwater issues on that piece of property?
Yes, it's part of just to the south of it, if you look on the final plat, that is part of a floodplain. So we're in the process of doing a CLOMAR for that in order to encroach upon that if we need to. We're still finalizing the building plans with respect to the public safety building. We may need to do that. I believe we'll end up doing that, but obviously we're going to take care of that before we can move into floodplain.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Being none, I'd ask for a motion.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Kubash.
I move the City of Dickinson Planning and Zoning Commission recommend approval of the public safety building addition rezoning and final plat as depicted in Exhibit A, as meeting all the requirements of the Dickinson Municipal Code and also being in the interest of the public health, safety, and welfare.
Is there a second to that?
Mr. Chairman, we have two items. I think they were, I don't know if they were separated. The first one should just be for the rezoning. Commissioner, if you just want to make a motion from rezoning from ag to limited commercial, and then after that we can have a motion for the final plats if you'd like to do it that way, Mr. Chairman.
That'd be great.
That would be fine.
Fine. Is there a second to that?
I'll second that.
Second by Mr. Elkin. Any discussion? Being none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Recommended. Item 2 is tied to this rezone petition. It's a final plat. It's to consider a final plat for the Public Safety Center, generally located in the northwest quadrant of State Avenue and 21st Street West. Site is approximately 9 acres. And Mr. Corton, would you like to continue on with this?
Sure. This is the final plat for the new Public Safety Center. As the public is aware, and if you're not aware, this is for the new fire and police station to be on the north side. This is needed for response times as our growth is going from the north and northwest. We needed to have a centrally located facility that would be on the northwest side of town in order to accommodate growth and to provide emergency services. In order to do that, we need to final plat it. We need to go through the platting process. This is the final plat for that. We have no conditions of approval and recommend approval.
Thank you, Mr. Croton. At this time, I'd ask if there's anyone in the public who'd like to make comment on this final plat. Please feel free to come forward. Being none, any commissioners wish to make final comment? Being none, we'll close the public portion of this, and I'd ask for a motion.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Alkin?
I move the City of Dickinson Planning and Zoning Commission recommend approval of the Public Safety Building Addition rezoning and the final plat as depicted in Exhibit A as meeting all the requirements of the Dickinson Municipal Code and also in being in the interest of the public health, safety, and welfare.
Is there a second to that motion? A second by Mr. Frederick. Any discussion? Being none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Mr. Croton. Item 3 on the regular agenda is a final plat. It's to consider a final plat for the Riverfront Estates. The site is Lot 10 of the Auditor's Plat Number 9 to the City of Dickinson. Northwest quarter of Section 10, Township 139 North, Range 96 West. It's approximately 36 acres. And at this time, I'd ask the party presenting, please feel free to come forward.
Morning. Bill Henry from Northbrook, Illinois. Are they going to do anything, or do you want me to speak first?
You can speak first. Let us know what you're doing, and
Okay.
we'll ask you some questions maybe.
We've been working with Ed in regards to a final plat on 16 lots. 15 would be residential, 1 tract for stormwater, and then a commercial lot. And then Block 16 would be a larger triangle piece across from River Road. Plan on developing residential and then selling the commercial piece. And then Block 16, we're working on what we're going to do there.
Any questions at this time for Mr. Henry? Mr. Kubas?
I had a question for Mr. Henry. There were civil comments that were given back to the applicant back in January. We haven't received comments or responses back to our comments on the civil plans yet. So there were some outstanding issues, I think, just general stormwater questions on some of the calculations. Do you know the standing on the responses to those comments?
Darren Fikes sent me an email this morning that he's sick, so he was supposed to be standing next to me. And
Okay.
he would have been able to answer those. So I'm going to have to defer to him and get back to you on those. I apologize. I thought those were taken care of.
Okay, that's something we'd like to see as city staff, is to have those comments addressed that we've made to the civil plans, just to ensure that the stormwater tract that Mr. Henry referred to is adequately sized for the subdivisions.
Other than that, Mr. Henry, everything else has been in order with the city?
Yes, sir. I believe so. I don't know if Ed has any comments or not.
Mhm. And Mr. Kubas, do you believe everything else was in order engineering-wise, other than these comments you're lacking to ensure that that stormwater is taken care of?
Well, we have received plans, but again, that can be an issue that will affect the plat or could affect the plat. That's why we'd like to see those comments back. So.
In the development agreement, don't I have to, the way it reads, I think you guys have to approve the plans. What you're saying, it could possibly change the layout of the plat?
Correct. With the stormwater pond, that tract, kind of in the southeast corner, if that were needed to be upsized, that would affect or could affect several of the lots adjacent to it. So that's why we'd like to see those comments addressed to the city's satisfaction.
Okay.
I think it's important. We have some issues with stormwater already
Mm-hmm.
in the city and other areas that haven't been addressed properly. So,
Okay.
any other comments or questions?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Kovash?
where is this in relation to Highlands? Is this like right next to it, or is it?
Yeah, Highlands is on the other side of 5th Street Southeast. So if you look at the plat, it'd be right over here.
But this is all, I don't want to say all one and the same, but in essence it is, isn't it? I mean, it's two different, but it's all the same party.
Yes, sir.
I just have a question as far, in behalf of the park board. I didn't see anything, and I don't believe that you guys have ever met with us on this park portion. We took land in Highlands, which was more than what you even would have had to give us.
Mm-hmm.
But the reason that was is because it was unbuildable property. And so that's why we ended up with more. And so the way I see it, and maybe I'm wrong, but it almost looks like for this new development, you basically counted what you gave us in Highlands for this, or am I wrong?
I'm sorry, I can't answer that question.
I think that's
Not
something we need to have.
because I don't want to, it's because I,
Yeah, that's fine. I just think it's something that we have to have answered, because this is a different development. And when I talked to James yesterday, he said also that nobody appeared in front of us over this too. So whether or not that land's going to be sufficient for both, I can't speak for the entire board.
I know Mitch Rubin had met with the park because there was talk of building a secondary, from what I understand, on the other side of the river, you have a 9-hole Frisbee golf course, and there was talk of that was going to be the development. They were excited about that.
But I
So,
believe that was part of Highlands.
not sure.
Yeah. Something we probably need to get straight,
Okay.
which is which. I would like to see us get that figured out too.
Commissioner Kovacs, I could comment on it. I'm not sure if he brought both of them together. It was my impression he was, but I wasn't part of the conversations, obviously, with the Parks Board. I mean, I had met with the original developer, Mitch Rubin, probably almost a year ago, with respect to this development. And it was my understanding that the dedicated land to the parks was going to be for both, but it may not have been presented that way, or there may have been a misunderstanding. I know I'd spoken to Sarah, and she had talked to James recently about that, and that was something that needed some clarification. So, if you want that issue addressed, we can always, put a condition in there that it won't go to City Commission until that issue is resolved one way or the other, or if you want to recommend continuance, you could do so as well.
No, and I don't dispute it. I mean, what caught my attention is I don't ever remember hearing Riverfront Estates. It was Highlands, and so it is a different development. If the intention was to have them both come in, I'm not so sure that we understood that.
Okay.
So I think it would be, the land may be sufficient. I'm not saying it's not, but it is a different development.
Okay.
And I believe the name has changed as well. I think that they were doing Highlands, and it was another version for that. And I just said, we have too many similar developments that are close to one another, and it'd be confusing. So propose a new name, and I think that's where we get the Riverfront. I don't recall that was the original name for that. So that may have been the case. And I just think there's probably just some misunderstanding, depending on which time that you're moving forward with respect to it.
That could very well be.
Mr. Henry, do you have a timeline? Are you going to start working on this project fairly soon?
On the riverfront lots, immediately. On the triangular piece, we're trying to figure out exactly what we're going to do there, how we're going to lay that out. And then on the commercial, we'd put that up with a broker as quickly as possible.
Okay.
We're not going to develop that ourselves.
Any other comments or questions?
Mr. Chairman,
Okay.
the plat is really, technically, it's really deficient. There's a lot of problems with the plat from a survey standpoint, to the point that I don't think we can approve this today. These aren't some minor omissions that maybe can be taken care of by staff between now and city. There are really some significant lapses in the survey part of this, and I think we need to send it back. There's significant work that has to be done on it. I also want to bring up the street situation. I think the proposed requirement in the development agreement for River Drive is that Lot 16 can't be developed until the road is paved. That means if Lot 16 is never developed, that the road won't get paved. And I don't think we do that with other developers, and I don't think we should do it here. I think that needs other solution that's a little bit more secure for the city on River Drive. But, as I say, the technical parts of the plat, it's just not, there's a lot of work left to do on this plat.
And you had intended only to do 15 lots, Lot 1 through 15, is that correct?
Yeah, we were going to start that immediately.
So Lot 16 really is left out of the picture, something you weren't going to do. Thank you, Mr. Jackson. Any other comments, questions?
Can I ask a
Oh,
question?
Mr. Henry, yes. Yeah.
Would you mind explaining to me what you think is deficient so I can address those, please?
You know, I can. I've given the list to Mr. Corton in writing. Maybe he can just give you that list.
Okay, because we've been back and forth several times, and I'm on the outside, unfortunately. My civil engineer's not here to answer those questions, but it's gone back and forth 3 and 4 times, and I thought we were good to go. We came to last meeting, and so if there is something, if there's a list, that way I can make sure everything is checked off. And
Yeah, it's your surveyor that you need to talk to about this. You know, I don't think I should bore everybody right now with the technical parts of it, but it's really significant, in my opinion.
I could provide you with the list. You know, for my review is kind of a cursory review. There are very specific things that, as a surveyor, you have that technical expertise to do. And I believe that they didn't do that, so I could provide the comments from Gene Jackson to you.
Okay, that would be great.
And we can move forward. Just to help you out, if you can get your civils approved, we've allowed people to start grading on that before they've got their final plat. That will take you some time to do your grading anyway. So a month delay in order to get this, in order to get all of your plat together is not necessarily going to slow you down because it's going to take you time to do your grading for the site anyway. The key on that is you've got to get your civils approved. And I know
Right.
they've been submitted in. I don't think they've been approved from city engineering. So keep that in mind. You have 2 different avenues that you can move forward with.
Right,
So
understood.
if you move forward on your civils, since we know that you're moving forward on the final plat, you can go ahead and, after that's done, start your grading, which will take you a couple months potentially to do
Right.
that. And by that time, you'll have everything resolved anyway.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments for Mr. Henry? Mr. Henry, do you have any other questions at this time?
No, sir, I think it was covered very well.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Somebody ask if there's anyone from the public who'd like to make comment on this final plat application. Please feel free to come forward. Anyone from the commission wish to make further comment? I think the Park District question should be resolved. The Park District should be very clear on what they have and haven't received, or should receive, or what they want to receive. The comments that the city engineer, Ms. Kubas, is waiting on stormwater, I think is important, and the fact that Lot 16 is left out of this, and the questions of paving and the plat technically is lacking some things that surveyors should be able to clean up, or engineers should be able to, I think is important. At this time, we'll close the public portion of this hearing, and I'd ask if someone would like to make a motion.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Jackson?
I think the proper thing to do probably is to defer action on the plat. I don't know, continue it. I'm going to move that we continue action on this plat and ask the developer to address park issues, survey issues, and pavement issues as well as anything else that staff may see that's incomplete.
There's been a motion to continue. Is there a second? A second by Mr. Kovash. Any discussion? For discussion purposes, if those issues are met, we will see this item at next month's regular agenda if the presenting party so chooses. Be fine with us. Thank you. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried to continue. Item 4 on our regular agenda is a final plat, to consider a final plat for the replat of Lot 1, Block 1 of the S&B subdivision. The site is generally located in the northeast quarter of Section 32, Township 140 North, Range 96 West. It's approximately 2.9 acres. This time I'd ask the party presenting, please feel free to come forward.
Good morning, Mr. Abrahamson, members of the board. My name is Will Ralph. I'm with Braxton Development, 1735 South 19th Avenue, Suite B, Bozeman, Montana. This plat we bring before you today is a right-of-way vacation plat for the area in the Sierra Commons Apartments. Originally, it was platted where there was a road connection between State Avenue and 21st Street. That separated the commercial track on the hard corner there with the Sierra Ridge Apartments. And as we got into the development of the project, we were working with Mr. Corton in the engineering department and found some deficiencies with the location of that access in relation to the 21st and State Avenue intersection. With more traffic coming in that area, there was potential with queue lengths, as well as there were some sight distance issues coming from the west because there's a fairly steep hill to the west. So there was kind of a public safety issue there. So we've been working with Mr. Corton and the engineering department to vacate some right of way there. It doesn't impact the access to the Sierra Ridge Apartments. All that stays the same. City utilities that are installed in there, but we have worked with the gas MDU, electric, cable television, and have gotten their permission through a right-of-way vacation, or the vacation petition to vacate that right-of-way. So basically the vacated right-of-way will become part of that commercial lot on the corner there. Access off of 21st, if it is available, will be determined at a site plan, at the site plan time when that's developed. So I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions for Mr. Rao? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
This time I'd ask if there's anyone from the public who'd like to make comment on this final plat. Please feel free to come forward to the podium. Any other comments from the commission? Mr. Corton, I'd like to hear your recommendation on this one.
We would recommend approval. Originally, this plat came through, if you recall, about 2 years ago, and since that time, engineering has looked at it, and due to our comprehensive plan and the access management program that we have for it, we felt that vacating it due to the increase in traffic would be there. Vacating this portion of the road would make sense. So we're in favor of that, and the proper procedure to do that instead of a street vacation would be anytime that we have a street that's already platted and shown on a plat, we want to make sure that that is removed, so we required them to go through the replatting process. We'd recommend approval.
Thank you, Mr. Corton. This time we'll close public portion of this hearing, and I'd ask for a motion.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Elkin.
I move the City of Dickinson Planning and Zoning Commission recommend approval of the replat of the S&B subdivision.
Is there a second to that motion? Second, thank you very much. Any discussion? Being none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Recommend approval. Thank you very much. Item 5, regular agenda, is a final plat. To consider a final plat of West Ridge Second Edition. The site is generally located in the southwest quarter of Section 31, Township 140 North, Range 96 West. The site is approximately 200 acres. This time I'd ask the party presenting, please feel free to come forward.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Jeremy Eastham with Roars Development. Before you this morning is the second addition to the West Ridge subdivision, just north of exit 59 and west of 30th. We, as you introduced it as a 200 acre, we've actually dropped that back down to 156 acres, and that's noted in the staff report. Basically, the subdivision is a mixed-use development. We have a large residential component in this addition, and some additional commercial, multifamily. It's a continuation of West Ridge Drive and several off streets to that, and we're really looking forward to bringing some single-family residential lots into town. So, hoping to get this project started this spring, and we do have several. I mean, it's been a long process. If you'll recall, we've been here about a year ago, and we've worked through several issues with staff, and I think just looking through the staff report, there's just the 4 conditions of approval, and we're fine with all 4 of those. So, if you don't have any questions for me, that's all I have to say.
Any questions at this time for Mr. Eastham? Thank you very much. This time I'd ask if anyone in the public would like to make comment on this final plat. Please feel free to come forward. Anyone from the commission wish to make final comment?
Mr. Chairman, I just want to make a little bit of a clarification under the 4 staff recommendations. It lists cash in lieu for parkland dedication. That's not entirely true. When we met with Roars quite some time ago, we actually looked at both West Ridge 2 and 3, which we haven't seen yet, and combine those 2 on parkland's behalf. The land, we really do want land, but the land we want is actually in West Ridge 3. So we are taking land instead of cash. The only way we'll end up with cash is if for some reason 3 does not go through or doesn't become annexed, then we'll end up with cash in 2. So we are taking land, we're combining 2 and 3, the total acreage, so that we get a bigger chunk of land. And I believe Roars is on board with that. They're well aware of what we talked about. So I just wanted on the record that at this point, it's not cash in lieu. It could be if 3 never comes through, but at this point, it is land.
We'll see if this proceeds, that recommendation is changed, the wording of that changed to land. Any other comments? Mr. Creton, I'd like to hear a recommendation.
We would recommend approval just to let Commissioner Kovash know. We still have the DA that we're working out. Since the land needs to be, since this plat needs to be annexed into the city, we have that as a condition that will state in the DA that they're in the process of annexing. They just need to get the information into us that prior to recordation of the plat, that the property has to be annexed into the city. We'll also put in there that prior to recordation of the plat, that the park fees has to be addressed or dedication of land. If you notice on their plat, they originally were approved for roughly 200 acres, and they removed 46 acres of that. And I presume that's probably where you're talking about, the westerly portion of it. And that would be where West Ridge 3 potentially could start. So that may be the land that you're referring to. But prior to recording of the plat, we'll make sure that you're comfortable on that. We'll put that in the development agreement. I'll make sure that Commissioner Colling has that in there. With that, Would that make you feel comfortable then?
Yes, that'd be sufficient.
Mr. Chairman.
Oh, go ahead, Mr. Alvin.
Ed, has the city designed 15th Street? Is that still in the process, or is that completed? And Roars apparently have agreed to construct this 15th Street along with Meyer Group, I'm assuming, right? Or funding up at
The
Page.
design of the road is not completed. We're in the process of doing it as we speak. We will ultimately build the road, and both Roars and Myers will contribute. At this point, we're looking at roughly a 50/50 payment for the street. That's why I noticed, that's why I placed it in the report, that agreement for West Ridge 1 for the funding of the road needs to be resolved, and that's what we're finalizing on the DA. Both parties are in agreement. It's just we're working out the last of the funding and the cost of the road. And we've let them know that this will not move forward to City Commission until the DA is signed. That means they have agreed to it, and the funding for the first phase of 15th Street is in agreement as well.
Okay, so is this going to be constructed all the way over to 50th then?
Their portion for this one would be the edge of where the centerpiece of West Ridge First is, similar to where Mr. Huff's property is at.
Yep.
And then their portion that they would need to build would be from that point all the way to 50th Street as part of this plat, yes.
Okay.
So, just building on that, Ed, can you tell us how we're going to get the additional right-of-way that's needed for 15th?
We've let the developer know, I believe a month ago, and we just had a meeting just 2 weeks ago with respect to dedicating 100 feet of right-of-way in order to build that road. And that could either be accomplished with a collaborative effort with the property owner to the north, Mr. Frenzel, or they would come back before we record the plat, and instead of 15th being 50-foot right-of-way, that would be 100-foot right-of-way. So we've left it in their, we placed the ball in their court, and it's for them to come up with a remedy prior to us completing this.
Okay, so before this is filed, the right-of-way issue on 15th will be resolved.
Needs to be resolved, correct.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I think we should approve this. There are some technical things here that I think need to be fixed too, but they're more minor, and I think that can be done. I would just like to ask the developer, the sheets that you've given us on the plat say that there's supposed to be 4 sheets to the plat, and we only have 3. Can you tell us what that's about?
If you'll recall, the original submittal was 4 sheets. When we dropped that 46 acres out, it only required 3 to fit everything on, and it looks to me like, or sounds to me, I didn't notice that, but it sounds to me like that's just a clerical error that needs to be fixed.
Okay.
It shall only be 3 sheets.
Okay, so it will be just a 3-sheet plat.
That's correct.
And a portion of this plat is a replat, right?
A portion of the plat, the eastern edge, is a replat of First. What's happened is just west of Menards, there was a strip of land that was included in West Ridge First. And when Menards purchased the property, they purchased, I guess, a smaller amount, or moved it to the east slightly, which left a strip of land, and we're just dealing with that strip of land with,
Sure.
with this pit plat.
Sure, and I think that's fine. I just think you need to note that on the plat.
That it's a replat in the title. Okay,
There are a couple other things as well, but
sure. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Cortana, I want to be real clear on the 50th, 15th to 50th. That issue of right-of-way will be resolved.
Yes.
That we will not be held up one way or the other of ever obtaining the ability to put a road through there.
Correct. The right-of-way is already there. for the first section, and I'm calling it two sections, basically from 30th Avenue west to the proposed 50th Avenue, which is part of this plat. The first section of that, we already have the right-of-way. We're already designing the road. We didn't have money, and we, as part of the negotiation with both parties, we stated to them, and they have agreed that they would pay for the road. They would pay for their fair share. We would design it, and we would build it. So we are responsible for getting it built at a reasonable period of time. But they have to fund the road. And if they, if all comes, they've all agreed to it, we're down to the last details of who's going to pay for engineering, who's going to pay for this and that cost. If for some reason that falls through, then West Ridge 2 does not get recorded, because you have to have that connection point. I don't foresee that being a problem, because both parties need to have that road to be built in order for Pinecrest to the north to be built, in order for West Ridge first and also for second to continue. So I don't see that as being a problem. It's just working out the last of the details for that. The second phase of the road, which pertains to this one, would be from the edge, the terminus, the western edge of the road, going westerly to propose 50th Avenue. And they need to show us somehow, some way, either negotiating with the party to the north or putting the road to the south and then dedicating all the right-of-way as part of West Ridge 2 and a portion of West Ridge 1 coming back and modifying that and showing 100 foot of right-of-way so that we could build that second road.
And that's really explicit.
It's been a complicated matter that we went back and forth with parties. So I'm trying to summarize it. Craig has been involved in it on a day-to-day fashion, but they're clear of what we need to have done in order to accomplish this, because West Ridge 2 has to have 2 points of access in order for emergency access. One is already established, West Ridge Drive. The second point is 15th Street Avenue. So that road has to be built before we'll issue any building permits. And that's already contained within the draft development agreement that we do have.
Thank you. I just wanted to be real clear on that. Thank you very much.
Clear as mud.
Okay. Any other comments? Now we'll close the public portion of this hearing. I'd ask for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I
Graham?
move that the City of Dickinson Planning and Zoning Commission recommend approval of West Ridge Second Edition Final Plat as depicted in Exhibit A and in accordance with the 4 conditions included in the staff recommendations.
And I'll second that.
And second by Mr. Elkin. Is there any discussion? This time then we'd ask for a vote on this. And I want to, those conditions, it's denoted that the parks will be satisfied. Okay. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you very much. We'll go to item 6 has been decided not to present, so we're going to go to item 7. It's a rezone petition. To consider a rezone petition from agricultural to general industrial. The site is generally located in the east half of the section, southwest quarter of section 16, township 140, range 96 east. Site is approximately 40 acres. This time I'd ask the party presenting, please feel free to come forward.
Good morning, Scott Heckelman, Boundary Engineering, Dickinson. We're asking for the rezoning of this particular piece of property from agricultural to general industrial to line up to the adjoining properties that are to the east of that.
Mr. Heckman, is this property being used for anything right now?
No, it's not.
Okay, when's the last time it was used for agricultural? Do you know?
That I couldn't.
Don't know. Oh, well. Anyone have any questions or comments for Mr. Heckelman at this time?
Can you tell us a little bit more what the plans are for the tract? Is it, do you intend to sell it with the property to the east, or are you going to break it up into a couple lots eventually?
That I couldn't tell you. I'm not sure what the general idea of that piece of property is, but the property to the immediate east of that is general industrial right now,
Yeah.
so.
I have one comment as well.
Mr. Elkin?
Any streets within this subdivision, the county's going to ask for those streets to be paved. So
Correct.
I'm hoping your developer understands that.
Yes.
Before any permits are issued. That's the way we want it. And I know we're a long ways off from going that far yet anyway.
Are there any roads in the interior of this piece of property now?
No, there are not.
And the exterior roads surrounding the property boundaries?
There's
Is it gravel section
There's a
line?
gravel road just to the south, on the south edge of it.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, access would need to
Corton.
be provided off of 33rd Street.
Any other questions or comments?
I have one.
Mr. Elkin?
Do you have something planned for this piece of property, or do you plan on just,
Not-
the developer just plan on flipping it or selling it out to someone?
That I'm not aware of at this point. We're just trying to get it lined up with the rest of the properties to the east of that.
Okay.
Any other comments, questions for Mr. Hageman? Thank you very much. So I'm going to ask if there's anyone in the public who would like to make comment on this rezone petition. Please feel free to come forward. Mr. Corton, how does this tie in with if we add another 40 acres of general industrial to the mix?
It is consistent with the comprehensive plan for that area.
Okay.
Looking at it, I'd have to go out and measure. I believe that we would go past the section line that we would have and go further to the west. So there is additional ability for industrial further to the west of that property, if that's your question.
That's the question. Just want to know is if this fits the comprehensive plan, and then if the city's responsibility for providing any water, sewer,
Nope.
roads, whatever to this site.
It's outside of our urban service area. Our urban service boundary stops at 40th, which is exit 34, I believe, or the stoplight at 34th Street as well. So we're 2 miles to the south.
So Mr. Elkin can take this home with him.
Yeah.
Yes, he can. He could have it.
Just another project we need. Let me ask you something, Ed. And is there a real need for more property to be zoned industrial? We have a considerable amount of property already within the ETZ as well as within the city that is already industrial. Would you agree with that? Would we be wise to allow for that, some point as fast as saturation within those other subdivisions before we go on and approving, even though this is it's adjacent to?
Well, we've got two issues. One, our comprehensive plan shows a 20-year land use allocation. If we were looking at saying, okay, we want you to infill existing industrial plats and other lands, we would have to do an amendment or at least establish a policy with respect to that. I mean, as part of our rezoning applications, since we adopted our comp plan, we've stated it needs to be consistent with it. Well, it is consistent with that.
Yeah.
We could come back and modify the comp plan and state that, this is a 20-year projection. However, for the next several years, we're not looking at any additional industrial rezoning if you wanted to do that. But I think for us to do that, we probably need to have some kind of an industrial study that, like Stark Development has done commercial and they've done industrial as well. I would anticipate that the market is still heavy for industrial, and we're talking bigger users for that, that we have not come close to saturating that development. The key is, purchasing land. I mean, people with available land may be asking for are asking for high prices for existing lands that's been rezoned for that property. Therefore, market economics would go about that you would find agricultural land at a cheaper rate, rezone it, and you save money. But that's traditionally what has happened. That's why we have a comprehensive plan. That's why we have an urban service area, and that's why we've limited particular land uses with respect to that, in order to accomplish our overall goals and vision for the city. But that falls within that. So, I mean, that's a discussion we could have at one of our workshops if we wanted to do that and provide a recommendation to the City Commission.
Another question, the concern that I have with so much of this, we see a lot of idle lots out there, and I believe Mr. Josephson understands that, and the weed issues, the dust issues, the really they're a nuisance. Unless somebody's actively engaged in doing something with that piece of property. We've had issues in the county, and I think Steve could answer that as well. And so how do we answer that, or how do we address those situations when we have a parcel of land out there? They may scrape, they may do whatever, but we have those issues, those nuisance issues. Who's in charge of enforcing those?
That would be
Obviously, it's going to be
the county.
We have an issue.
Yeah, my suggestion would be is that you have either a land disturbance ordinance, something to that effect. That many jurisdictions have various forms to that. Where I came from, you could not strip the land unless you already had an entitlement or in the process of granting. In other words, a building permit, something to that effect, to avoid the problem that you have where somebody comes in, strips the land for marketing, and doesn't take care of it. And then when we get our windy storms, you have the dust that flows all over the place, and the neighbors around them complain about that. That would be a land disturbance or some kind of an ordinance, but ultimately it comes back to people being able to enforce that.
So right now, Steve, maybe you could answer that question. How could we approve something like this and yet still have those concerns addressed?
Steve Josephson, City County Planner. Excuse me. The idea of having a land disturbance ordinance sounds like as if it's worth looking into. Currently, what we've been doing in the county side with some of the larger industrial developments is we've been requiring, as part of the planning process, we've been requiring the developer to contact the county weed officer and requiring them to do an inspection. And if they do find invasive weeds there, then they've got to go ahead and do a weed plan that identifies how they're going to control them. That's how we've been conditioning in the county.
Could we apply that to this same?
They're not, at this point, they're not proposing a plat. So
They're doing
you
a
could,
rezone, I understand that.
you could propose that as part of the rezone, put that as a condition. That's been kind of an area that we've been back and forth on. What can we establish as conditions for rezonings and which ones can't we do? If you feel comfortable with putting a condition that prior to any land disturbance, you have to get permission from the weed control or something to that effect, that would be fine to place that as a condition of approval.
The fact of the matter is we are not, sure, there may be grass out there, but there may be already noxious weeds already present on that property. I'm not sure they're, it could be Canada thistle, it could be whatever. Greg, you understand that too. But my concern is even if they do not develop that property and yet they allow those weeds to go to seed, it becomes an issue for everybody surrounding them.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Jack?
40 acres, technically they don't ever need to plat it, correct?
As long as they have, as long as they're not putting in a new road, correct.
Yeah.
And they already have access off of 33rd, but if they split it and want to have an interior one, then at that point they'll need to do that. I would recommend you just place a condition on there, whatever you feel appropriate, before they can do any land disturbance on the property.
Just a question, isn't this the tract, isn't there a home at the south end of this tract? Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
So, Mr. Josephson, further question on the, once the property, if it was changed to industrial and the party that owns it are going to use it, whatever, besides they're going to park 50 trucks on it?
Oh, no, they'd still have.
Then who's going to enforce that, saying that you can't do that yet? I mean, there's an issue of doing this that comes up, that places a burden on the county, an immense burden on them to see that this property goes from agricultural to industrial, and then what terms apply to it and usage applies to it. The party fully understand that you can't do anything with it whatsoever. The zoning has just changed.
The zoning has just changed at this point. Any use is going to require coming through a process for improving the property. You know, any sort of site plan review and so on, they would still need to meet the county's requirements for that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, having said that, there have been issues. There have been issues with land that's been rezoned, and in some cases has not been rezoned, and is still in use for something that hasn't gone through development process or rezoning.
Are you familiar with the property and the home that's on there?
I have visited, I have gone out to the site. So that the home that's out there, the people there can still continue to live there. They can still use that until some time.
And is that their intent, you think? They're going to live there?
I have not heard from them. You know, my conversations have been with the applicant.
Okay.
But I'm thinking that if they're rezoning it at some time in the future, you know, they must be planning to, you know, to sell that off.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
With respect to your question about the trucks and the rest, even though the city no longer issues building permits in the county, zoning jurisdiction applies within ETZ. That would be a land use, that would be a zoning matter. So we can enforce that part of it. Land disturbance, though, is not part of the zoning code, we do not enforce that within ETZ. So keep that in mind, that though we no longer issue building permits in the county, the zoning still applies for that. We still take care of the subdivision process and the zoning. So if there is a violation with respect to a land use issue, that would fall under our zoning code, and we would go through the enforcement process of doing that. But the land disturbance is not a zoning matter. That is a separate part of the code, and that only applies within the city limits.
Mr. Chairman, I guess what
You're
I'd
welcome.
really like to see here is the same conditions that we use in the county apply to a situation such as this in reference to dust or weeds or what have you, any nuisance items that come about. And Steve, I don't know if maybe you want to put something together, but
Okay.
I
We
think
can-
we should have met with the county on this. I mean, even though it's within the ETZ, I think that they should have at least looked at how we handle situations in the county. And we have
Okay,
Steve there.
absolutely. Absolutely. I can craft some conditions, and, you know, especially the thing about the weed control that they've got to do a, you know, have the weed control, the county weed officer do an inspection, you know, you know, and if, should any invasive weeds be found on the property, that they would have to come up with a plan and practice that and go ahead and spray. So if you're proposing that as an amendment, you know, I can draft something up similar to what we have in our county.
Well,
in
that's
our
what I
county
would like to see
ordinances.
happen
Okay.
here.
Okay.
I think Commissioner Elkin, what you could do is, you know, instead of knowing that you have particulars for that, you could just say, you could recommend one condition to be attached to the rezoning, that prior to any land disturbance on the site, they must receive Stark County permission. And then the permission would be contingent upon weed control and any other processes that you feel are warranted, that are established as part of your code.
So you're telling me that we need to approve it on the county commission side as well?
No, I'm just saying you need to put a condition on that. Unless you continue this, if you recommend approval, you need to attach that condition now.
Okay.
If you want to think about it, you can continue it for a month and then draft a condition, or you could just propose a blanket condition to that effect, and then move forward with that, and it can go to the city commission for final decision. It's your call which way you want to go.
I would rather see this continued
I would too.
and have Mr. Josephson have ample time to put the conditions that I feel should apply to any situation in the county.
Certainly, and it's not just a matter of the conditions too, but figuring out,
Right.
you know, figuring out how it's going to be implemented and enforced.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I think what
We
we're
can
trying to
work
do is avoid what happened to the ground immediately to the east, correct?
Mhm.
Correct.
Where it was disturbed and there were significant weed problems, significant dust problems, and maybe still are, I don't know.
Is that acceptable to you, Mr. Josephson? Does that sound like a good plan?
Absolutely. I understand the concerns because since I've been here, you know, the subdivision to the east of here has been, the county's been, and the city have been receiving calls about, you know, about weeds and dust and so on. So absolutely.
Thank you very much, Mr. Josephson.
And we will let the, we'll also let the applicant know, you know, we'll share those conditions with them prior to this going to the next zoning, planning and zoning commission meeting.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other comments from the commission? Being none, we'll close the public portion of this hearing, and I'd ask for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I
Mr.
would
Elton?
ask for a continuance of this zoning request.
A motion to continue, is there a
I'll
second? Second? Any discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, motion carried. Rezone petition will continue at the next regular scheduled meeting unless someone wishes to have it removed. Item 8 on our regular agenda is a preliminary plat. It's to consider a preliminary plat for a replat of the Northern Heights subdivision. Site is generally located in the northwest quarter of Section 28, Township 140 North, Range 96 West. It's approximately 4 acres. At this time, I'd ask the party presenting, please feel free to come forward.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, Dennis Bemis with Northern Plains Engineering, 141 3rd Street West, Dickinson. As noted, we're presenting a preliminary plat for approval of a replat of Northern Heights subdivision. It's 4 acres. It's going to be, it's currently zoned R2. It will be 10 lots. We're proposing 24 units on those 10 lots, also providing a tract of land for on-site detention. The site will, access to the site will be off of State Avenue. And we've met with the Parks Department, and we'll be providing cash in lieu on this site since it's such a small site. We're also working with the city as far as the development agreement is concerned. We're trying to get some costs put together on what the percentage would be for this developer as far as State Avenue being developed, since that will be our access to this site. I believe at this time that's pretty much what we have to present.
Thank you. Anyone have any questions at this time? Comments?
Mr. Chairman, I think
Mr. Jackson.
when we rezoned this, we understood that this was going to be the use, and, you know, looks pretty routine to me, I think. We need to remove the utility easements on the front of the lots. We've been asking that the utility easements be shown only on the rear of lots. And then I don't know if engineering has looked at the size of that cul-de-sac. I can't read the numbers, but need to make sure that that's big enough, that's all.
Yeah.
Thank you,
I-
Mr. Jackson. Yes, sir.
I'm sorry. I don't believe we have any utility easements located on the front, Mr. Jackson. We actually have the building setback envelope shown
Oh,
on that
okay.
plat, so I believe that's what it is.
Okay, I was looking for that in your legend, couldn't see it. Looks like utility easements.
It will, we'll make sure we clarify that. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments at this time? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
This time I'd ask anyone in the public who would like to make comment, please feel free to come forward. Being none, Mr. Kubas, do you have any comment on the size of that cul-de-sac?
Engineering hasn't looked at that yet. It looks like it's probably going to meet the requirements that we have for the city and for the fire department. But we'll be sure to look at that before final plat.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Josephson, at this time I'd ask for a comment from you.
Recommendation. Yes, this plat was originally approved in 1999 for a single lot, and it's come up for a replat. As the applicant said, they want to put 10 lots on there. Just to let you know that through the review process for the preliminary plat, both the fire department and engineering staff looked at the cul-de-sac and have commented that it needs to be at least 96, 96-foot diameter, and that has been conveyed. To the applicant. And there is a condition on here that says that the final roads are subject to approval by the city engineering department. So just wanted to point out a few of the 10 conditions that are attached to this. That prior to final plat approval, a final stormwater management plan shall be approved to the satisfaction of the city engineer. The interior and perimeter road design and configuration shall be approved to the satisfaction of the city engineer. Also, prior to approval, the final plat shall indicate the dedication of 75 feet of right-of-way along State Avenue, and that State Avenue shall be designed and constructed prior to the issuance of any building permits. And the timing of the road construction will be described in the final subdivision agreement. Otherwise, the other conditions are fairly standard for a preliminary plat, and I spoke to the applicant's representative, and he said that he did review those and didn't have any comment back. So staff recommends approval subject to the 10 conditions that you see before you, and I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
Can you comment on the timing of the finishing of States?
I think I may defer to city engineering on that.
I'll defer.
State Avenue is being designed right now, looking at a bid for next month in March. So the completion of State Avenue would be towards the end of this year, if everything goes as planned.
And it appears as though emergency services, the fire department is okay. I mean, that's the way it appears here
Well, they have some concern. They want to see the wider cul-de-sac.
Well,
And
I
that
would
was,
agree.
pardon?
You know, in the county, I think we're 120 feet, right, Steve? And in here, we're 96 feet.
Can we get a clarification? I think that, is the 96 intended to be the right-of-way diameter or the paved
Well,
diameter?
we have the fire chief here, so.
It appears as though the city likes, or the fire department likes cul-de-sacs.
No, not really, but the problem with this development was there was no way that they could punch through to a.
Well, and I understand that,
Yeah,
yeah.
so they're left with a cul-de-sac as their means, as their internal road system.
This cul-de-sac can be smaller because it's close proximity to the new fire station. You can run a hose over there.
We like the cul-de-sacs to be as big as we can possibly get them. The minimum size, as referenced by the International Fire Code, as adopted by the city of Dickinson, the minimum size is 96 feet, or sized to the largest truck that the city owns. In this case, our ladder truck works with that 96-foot diameter. Of course, larger, as far as we're concerned, is always better, but that is the minimum suggested, or the minimum recommended size by our adopted code.
I believe, Bob, we're at 120 feet. Steve, am I wrong? In the county, I believe that's it.
I think you're right. Two different things. Okay, I've been, do you want to, go ahead, Mr. Venus.
That would be great to emulate that, but that's not what our
But that's
code,
not what your code.
right, that's not what our code as adopted by the city. It gives as a minimum.
I just assumed that you must enjoy cul-de-sac.
I don't like them at all.
No, we really don't.
Yeah, it's given as a viable option for a dead-end road, however, but, yeah, it doesn't do much for strategy or tactics when you need it.
Well, as
Thank you.
Mr. Bemis has informed me, the right-of-way is actually 120 feet.
Okay.
Okay, there you go. Thank you.
And I would like to know on that right away though, the way it's described, is there off-street, all off-street parking in that cul-de-sac, or people are going to be able to park on that right away? Going to reduce it down to 94 feet? I'm seeing a 47-foot radius.
When the code recommends a 96-foot minimum diameter, that is unobstructed.
Okay.
That is an unobstructed area. So if that is the minimum, then on-street parking would not be allowed. That needs to be understood. That is an unobstructed access.
The problem with a cul-de-sac is just by its nature, you don't, when you take driveways out, you don't end up having much curb left. So there really isn't much room for on-street parking. There may be a little.
Okay, any other questions?
If I may, Commissioner.
Sure.
The other thing concerning State Avenue, as with any of the other developments on that northern part of town, finishing State Avenue is paramount to our access to anything that's there. So that, and I know that engineering is very cognizant of that, we'd rather see, we'd in fact need to see State Avenue finished before building permits are issued. Thank you.
Absolutely. Okay,
So they've got plenty of time to figure out this 96-foot,
absolutely.
because the permits will not be issued till state is finished, not started or whatever. It says
No,
actually
until it's
finished.
finished, until it's actually finished, there will not be any building permits issued.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Josephson. Anyone else have any questions for Mr. Josephson? Thank you very much. Any other comments or questions? Being none, we'll close the public portion of this hearing. I'd ask for a motion.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Elkin.
I move the City of Dickinson Planning and Zoning Commission recommend approval of the replat of the Northern Heights subdivision preliminary plat as depicted in Attachment A, as meeting all the requirements of the Dickinson Municipal Code and also being in the interest of public health, safety, and welfare, along with staff recommendations, the 10 conditions be followed as well.
There's been a motion to approve by Mr. Elkin with the conditions. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Jackson?
Just one comment. I'm thinking about this conversation about building permits and States Avenue. You know, I can understand that we don't want to have to fight a fire through that construction and all. I think that's good. But I would hope that we would allow a developer to submit his building permit applications and review them and be poised. You know, I think we want this development. I think we think it's good. And I think we should try to facilitate it as best we can. So I would hope that we allow them to at least submit applications and even review those applications and maybe hold off on actually issuing them, just to grease the skids, so to speak.
I think you're right, because that condition, now, I was thinking about that, it says till state's completed, and that could put them into a long way out on a plan that we think is okay. Plus, we know that's going to be, the state's is going to be done. I mean, we have city projects up there.
There will probably be a time on States Avenue that a fire truck couldn't get through there. So I certainly understand the concern.
Sure.
Well, the reason for the condition is the fire truck will not drive upstate as it is right now. You know, due to the surface of the road and the rest, it would damage the fire truck, and it's not something the fire department wants to do. This is their primary access, so they need to have the road paved in order to do that. With respect to the building permits, we could do that, but we're talking residential, residential single-family building permits, even during the height of things. Since I have 3 people that can review in my department, those are normally done within a week or so. It's not a commercial building permit in which it may take a month because you have additional reviews from different agencies with respect to that. So we could do that, but I don't see that it's going to be a significant delay if they submitted it at the time that the road was built, that we knew the fire department and police could traverse up the road. But normally for single-family permits, we're looking at about a week. So I don't see that as being a detrimental thing to the applicant at all. That is the same condition that we have imposed for Northern Meadow Hills up north for the Mike Cook property to just to the west of where Cook Meadow Hills is located at. The road needs to be built. It's their second access in order to get there, their main access to their development, and they cannot submit any building permits until such time as the road is built.
Thank you, Mr. Croton. Any other discussion? Further discussion? Being none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Motion carried, recommended, approved. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, I would recommend a 5-minute break before we get into discussion of billboards. I would hope that all the Planning Commission members can stay. This is an issue that has been sent back from the City Commission. We had the first reading January 1st, and they wanted to get your comments with respect to digital billboards and billboards in particular. So I would suggest that if you could stay, that would be great. This will be a lengthy discussion. We have several representatives from the billboard industry here. So I would suggest that we have a 5-minute break before we get into that discussion.
Suggestion taken. We will take a 5-minute recess right now. And this is a special session attached to our regular meeting. It's to deal with sign regulations. At this point in time, I'll turn this over to Mr. Croton, our city planner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I mentioned to you before, the reason that we are bringing this back is a request from the City Commission. Before I talk about that, I'll just kind of encapsulate or summarize, where we are at, with respect to our sign ordinance. As you recall, back in last spring, we had 3 meetings, workshops, with respect to our sign code. We went over various issues of the proposed sign code. We finished up, I believe, in July or August. We recommended at the City Commission. City staff was going to work on some graphics and displays to talk about the differences of pole signs and pylon signs and some other issues. We got behind due to our development that we have, and it just weren't able to do that. We finally moved forward in January 21st, to bring it to City Commission, the proposed sign code that you had recommended approval back in the fall of this year. At that meeting, we had a representative from one of the sign companies, Dakota Outdoor Advertising. They showed up and opposed the provision that, with respect to billboards, that continued the prohibition of billboards within the city. They wanted to have billboards to be allowed with certain conditions, I presume. The City Commission debated that and didn't want to conclude the matter just themselves. They ended up approving the first reading with the idea for staff to consider some possible amendments. At the next meeting, I proposed that instead of us coming up with that, why don't we bring it back to the Planning Commission, get your input, which is the proper way of doing it, and then bring back your recommendation to City Commission for final decision of the second reading. That's why we're here today. I've let Newman Signs know, and I believe we have maybe another sign company as well. They could come and talk about what they feel should or should not be part of the sign code. I would recommend that you adhere to their public testimony. You could limit them if you like. You could listen to them talk as long as you want. That's up to you. This is a workshop with respect to that. You have a copy of the draft revision to the sign code that Matt Cullen, City Attorney, drew up with respect to the comments from City Commission on January 21st. And then you also have a copy of an email that we sent out yesterday with the 3 questions. My recommendation to you would be, let's hear public testimony, then you could close it down, then we could discuss those 3 questions that Matt Cullen proposed to you, and if you want to, you can get into the proposed amendment to the sign code. This will be a lot of information that will be given to you at one time. Feel free that you don't have to make a decision today. I mean, this will be a lot of information, and if you want to consider it, think about it, we could have another meeting at the next Planning Commission. I could provide additional data if you want me to as well. So it's kind of up your at your pace, however you want to pursue this. The key is to ultimately bring back a recommendation. If you want to just state that you're comfortable with the existing ordinance as is, and the City Commission wants to amend it, you're more than welcome to do that, or you could provide your recommendations of additional amendments to that. So with that, it's kind of a summary of where we're at. I'll leave it up to you, Mr. Chairman, however you want to proceed forward with that. But I think we've got 3 different items today. One would be public comment, and then the second one would be addressing the 3 issues that were part of the email that was sent to you today, the memo from Matt, kind of how you want to holistically look at billboards and digital billboards in particular. And then if you want to look at the proposed amendment to the sign code that was recently drafted up, we could discuss that as well. So I'll leave that up to you, however you want to move forward.
At this time, I think we'll move forward. We will take public comment on the proposed ordinance and changes to the ordinance to the City of Dickinson on sign regulations. So I would ask if there's anyone in the public, and there are people here that are aware of this, that would like to make comment on this and give a viewpoint. Please feel free to come to the podium, state your name, your address, and we will be glad to hear your comments. We'll take comments. We may ask you questions, but basically we want to hear comments and we'll take it as input.
Good morning. Mr. Chairman, I'm Leo Ness with Newman Signs, or Newman Outdoor Advertising, out of Jamestown. I reviewed the draft ordinance that Matt sent over to Carrie, our CEO, and there's a lot of information that, and from what I've been doing this over 30 years, working with billboards, and then when you get into the sign codes, there's a lot of information that takes a lot of time to digest. I'm familiar with it and understand. To some of you, this might be relatively a new. I know the Planning Commission here is busy. If you look at all the projects, and I was talking to the engineer back there about how many. With the workload and stuff, and signs are, I guess part of that. I understand the city's wanting to control how things look, how they're built, how it's developed, all that type of thing. But in reviewing this draft, short of just testimony, we almost need to look at it on a page-by-page basis. Now, I don't know if that's acceptable to you, but I think if you look at it from that perspective, I think there's a couple other sign companies here. Some of these things on certain pages are going to affect the billboard guy. Some of them are going to affect the on-premise sign guy. I mean, they're all going to have different types of things, and I don't know if it's, you know, how it works, but typically when we do these, it's kind of a round table thing. We go page by page, and everybody, you know, line by line item, and said, okay, you know, typically we're fine with that, or we would have an issue with that. This code, as it's written from the draft version, on several, you know, it's got some things that basically say billboards aren't allowed in the city limits or the ETZ zone. And I think, I've got too many sets of this stuff, but let's see.
Well, this time, Mr. Ness, if you'd like to make a comment on that, go ahead and make the comment, and we will look at it, but not at this time. We will take your comments. If you feel you have a perception on something, make a comment on it, say, you know, like if you feel on page 8 there's something about that, give us your opinion. We'll
Okay.
take it down and we'll digest it.
Okay, so you want me to go through all 16, 17 pages?
No, your comments on any of them that you feel are important to you.
Okay. I'll do that. I guess one of the things I noticed on here as far as permits, okay. Let's see. I'll just go through here and with my highlighted items. Okay, let's go under billboards, under section 391050. It's a special, or based on this code, you want it to be a special use permit. Okay, that would be fine. The item number 5, billboard sign may be permitted only along and within 100 feet of the right-of-way of U.S. Highway 94 and Highway 22. Okay, does that include 94 Business Route or Villard, or you know, this is basically 2 highways, north and south and east and west. But it says outside the city limits of Dickinson. So I think that should be defined as either, I mean, if they're outside the city limits, that puts you back into I guess, the county's jurisdiction. And so that, I think, needs to be clarified. It's got under Section B, special provisions regarding digital billboards. Billboards shall not be within 500 feet of any other billboard sign. Every city, I'm not going to suggest that Dickinson follow every city in North Dakota, but Fargo, Bismarck, Grand Forks, Minot, all have a required spacing. Under item number 1, you have a required spacing of 1,200 feet between any 2 digital billboards, is basically the spacing from 2 digital signs. That's the same in all those cities. In certain aspects, they have to be 500 feet apart. There's 500 feet within any ground sign. I don't understand. That really shouldn't be in there because I think you're trying to space billboards. A ground sign is a totally different sign, and I would need clarification. I've got a question mark here. What does that mean? I mean, as far as a ground sign. But typically, anything that's on the state, on I-94 or Highway 22, which is what's defined in here, is subject to the federal and state requirements before we get into the city. The billboards along the interstate have to be 500 feet apart. That's a federal law. The state federal agreement of 72 upholds that. That's as close as they can be. That's already in a place. It's been in place since 1965. So the spacing of 1,200 feet here on item number 1 is kind of irrelevant if you're only limiting them to Highway 22 and I-94. Highway 22, the primary system allows for 300-foot spacing outside of city limits.
Why do you think it's irrelevant?
Well, because if you, well, it's not, I don't mean to go that way, but the space, I guess my point I'm making is that federal and state law already are policing the off-premise or basically billboards already. But based on the language of it being only on those 2 highway systems, if that's the way I read this, and maybe I'm understanding it incorrectly, the 1,200-foot spacing is when you, because we're in the digital sign section, and my point with Mr. Jackson, was the 1,200-foot spacing is between any 2 digital signs in just about every city in the state right now. The spacing between a static billboard and a digital billboard could be 500 feet. But 2 digitals, if you have 1,200-foot spacing on digitals, that would put one every, the nearest thing would be one every half mile.
Mhm.
But if you're limiting them to these 2 highways, does that mean that other streets, I mean, I don't know that there are any that are not on the highway system in the city of Dickinson right now. I think they all are. If you include Business Route 94 or Ballard, I think every off-premise sign is contained in those areas, which would already have been following the federal and state rules for many years. But that's just, I don't understand why there would be a spacing from a ground sign there, when that's, if you want me to kind of go through there under section 1.
That is for a stagnant billboard. That is, I didn't draft up the ordinance. That was by Matt Colling. So it's 500 feet. The reason we're doing it is we feel that the 500 feet, that could change. 1,200 feet is between digital signs. Digital signs have a higher impact. We feel that they should be separated at a greater distance.
Okay, so it should be between, it could be amended to read between any 2 digitals.
Every 2
instead of
digital
any-
signs need
Instead
to
of
be
any
12.
other billboard.
Yeah, any 2 digital signs need to be 1,200 feet apart. And you need to make sure that there's not a stagnant sign within 500 feet of that. You have 2 separation distances.
Okay, so the ground sign could be the only thing I highlighted there was the ground sign, because I said, what does that mean? Because I'm a
Understand.
billboard guy, I know off-premise, and the Indigo sign guys know, we go off-premise, on-premise. That's the.
Absolutely.
The state does that, the federal, has already identified, and I know we've had that conversation on-premise, your old ordinance or existing code didn't allow for any off-premise type things.
Yeah, later on, we talk about, as a proposal, as part of the billboards or digital signs, that they couldn't be within 200 feet of an existing on-premise sign. And the reason for that is to make sure that that digital sign does not dwarf an existing business sign. So that's an additional separation requirement as well. Will that impact anything? I don't believe so. With respect to your first question, the direction we got from the City Commission would be that they wanted to have an amendment to the sign code to allow billboards. They didn't feel that new billboards within the city limits should be permitted. So that's why we stated in here that if you're going to propose a billboard, it'd need to be along I-94, and that'd be along the corridor, not the business loop. And then also outside the city limits on Highway 22. So there is, we were clear with respect that no billboards would be allowed within the city limits.
At the present time, Ed, can I ask a question? What is the distance as you're coming into the city? There's a series within the ETZ of signs, billboards already out there. What is the distance between those signs at the present time? Anybody have any clue?
They're 500 feet.
They're 500, okay.
That's along 94, that's as close as the federal and state laws always have allowed.
Okay, so
Since
they are
1960
500 feet though?
They're 500 feet apart.
Okay.
they would never have been permitted if they weren't, because anything that's on the state, anything that's along a state federally funded road, which is pretty much every highway around, is got to require, or if it's visible from there, you know, that road has to obtain a permit from the North Dakota DOT.
One of the questions I had, I don't know if this is the time to ask this, but, you know, I'm seeing the spacing requirements for digital, but I'm not for other billboards.
This is,
Did I just miss it someplace?
well, there are some parts in this provision here, and I'm not saying that this is ready to go to City Commission. Matt quickly drew this up before he left. He wanted to encapsulate or at least put in the City Commission's recommendations with respect to an ordinance. As part of the discussion that after you take in public testimony, that memo that Matt talks about, those 3 questions, depending on how you answer those 3 questions will depend on the final decision of how we address billboards specifically and billboards and then also digital billboards. So I really, you know, at this point, I know Matt crafted it up. There is issues in here that I do have as well. I think it's probably best instead of, you know, if you want to, you can go line by line, but depending on the discussion that we'll have afterwards, do you want to have billboards in the city? Do you not? Do you want to allow, you know, certain variations to that? We're going to rewrite this anyway. So I wouldn't look at this as ready to be brought back to the City Commission for second reading. It's not that complete.
No, and
but you could use it as a guide. These
yeah,
are issues
that's
that
kind of
have.
what I mean, we've had, you know, we've been in the, I guess Newman Outdoor's been in the business almost 6 years, and we've gone through a lot of these and continue to go through them all the time, and we kind of have an idea of how they work. I mean, as far as information, you know, I mean, if we need to go through it line by line and submit our, you know, we've have done it that way. I've got one from the CEO here. She's got, you know, can submit it, but that would just be a, you know, clarification on some of these things. 300-foot spacing from a park is fine. 300-foot spacing from you know, on item number 5 and number 6 is fine. Residential zone, most cities call that sensitive land use spacing, that type of a thing. However, it needs to be defined as how you measure that. I think the federal highway and state usually measure things. You know, let's just say, for example, you were looking at highway, trying to think of an Villard, for example. If you were going to allow a billboard on Villard, and based on what we've read, you're not right now, but if you had a spacing within 300-foot residential spacing, that's usually a city block. That's going to get you, north and south of there, you're going to find a house just about anywhere along there, pretty much. So you could limit it by that. So if you're going to have spacing from sensitive land uses, should be measured along, I think that the terminology should be for as measured from the curb line on which is, you know, and along the street in which its orientation is. That way you're measuring up and down the road and not sideways. I think in most cases that's how the federal measurements are done and the state DOT measurements are done. It's in relationship to that road that the sign is orientation is on.
Could I interrupt you again?
Go ahead, Mr.
And, you know, I knew that there were federal spacing requirements. I didn't know what they were. You've talked about the 500 feet. Are there other things that we should know? And maybe you know all these, but I don't.
Well, yeah, there's, you know, there's one set of rules for the interstate system, and then there's a different set of rules as far as spacing on a primary highway system, which would be Highway 22 or Highway 83 or Highway 85. But I-94, I-29, those are pretty much cut and dry.
Okay, now Highway 22 is a state highway.
Right.
Does that make
but
a difference?
It's received federal dollars, so you've got to jump through. But the state, if I remember correctly, Mr. Jackson, the spacing on Highway 22 outside of corporate city limits is minimum of 300-foot spacing. Now you can go inside city limits and under state rules be every 100 feet. But I don't think, I mean, one kind of blocks the other, you wouldn't, you wouldn't do that.
Sure.
I mean, it's about, how they read and what they look like, and we're not interested in, polluting the roadways of the state. We take a lot of pride in what kind of a product we put out there. We build a nice single-pole steel structure. There, I put the way the inventory of billboards in North Dakota, I would put up against any other state in the nation because they're pretty high-quality type of thing. Now, I know you've got some east of town that are going to get fixed up, and that's probably a good thing, But there are certain, the interstate's got a little different thing, and there's some ramp spacing requirements, whether you're inside or outside the city limits on the interstate, which some apply, some don't, depending on whether you're in or out.
Are there any limitations as to how close to the right-of-way you can be?
Can't overhang any right-of-way.
Otherwise, right up to the right-of-way?
To answer your question with respect to how do we do the measurements, everywhere I've been in Florida and California and Washington, whenever we've done it, we measured it at the pedestal. And you have a 300-foot radius around it. If you hit a zoning district, then you have to move it. That allows you flexibility on the site in order to do that. I do it by zoning district. The reason for that is because every once in a while in a commercial zone, you may have a non-conforming residence. If you apply the residence to that, then guess what? Then you don't have a site.
Right.
So this is actually a fair way of interpreting that, so you don't get into the issue of, well, you have a non-conforming use, you have a residence there that's been there, it's a commercial zone, and now you can't stick a billboard in there. So that's why I do it by the residential district. So you would.
No, I'm fine with having a spacing from the residential district. I think if you go to radial or a circle, an example would be, it should be along the road, and because I think you can find a house within 300 feet is a city block, give or take. You can find a residential house along Villard, probably either way you go, which would preclude the whole area. Is it reasonable to assume that billboard could be seen by that house a block north or south of there? Probably not. But I mean, I think we've always used, the federal government has always used as measured along the road that we're talking about and not a side street. And the state has always done that, and we've always done that. In Fargo, they actually did exactly that same thing, Ed, where they amended their sign code to clarify the measurement along the road. However, then their land development code or their land use code still had that radial in there, and in house cleaning measures, they corrected the land development code or their land use code to coincide with the ordinance because they had a conflicting issue. For simplistic reasons, it was, you get your planning staff, your engineering staff is busy. You don't want to. I mean, if you're going to allow billboards, that'd be great. If we're going to also allow them, then it should be something that everybody can determine on without having it take 6 months to figure out should this be legal or not. I mean, I know you guys are busy. The planning commission's got a huge job out here, and it's not going to get any easier for you with all the development and the oil activity and that. And as long as that continues, you guys are going to be, you're going to earn your money if they pay you or not. But it's just one of those things. So
feel free to provide that language. You could come in with a markup sheet, based upon the ordinance of things that you can propose, and we could, we could look at that issue there. So, but go ahead and move forward.
You can keep making comments and questions, and we'll take them as comments.
Okay.
But as far as 6 months go, I've been looking at billboards for 65 years. So I don't think there's really an expediency here. So I think we'll have time to take your written comments if you submit them also.
Okay. Under C, illumination of signs, the billboards have never been allowed to have flashing, blinking, intermittent, or moving light, digital or otherwise. It's as long as they're on federally funded state roads, it's never been allowed. That wouldn't need to be in there. Total maximum wattage per sign face shall be 400 watts. That just is not possible. Some of the light fixtures are 400 watt bulbs, and from a digital aspect, they take a lot more juice than than a 400-watt bulb. So that, item number 5, I would say, is just way too low. Other cities do control digital billboards by illumination standards, lumens, that kind of thing.
That part of it, I will propose some additional language to address the illumination, to have it so that you could have a higher illumination during the day, then you have a meter on it that it corrects itself as the light goes down.
Yeah, they do.
In order for you not to have a racetrack sign that's in the middle of the day. So you have that ability to adjust it. You have the nits that you could talk about, candle strength. I think the standard is .03 candle lights. Those would be part of the illumination issue, so I wouldn't worry so much about that.
Yeah, they're by design. They're the digitals that we operate in North Dakota right now they're a little brighter during the high sunlight because they need to be seen, and then as the evening, then they're adjusted back. And we use a Daktronics out of South Dakota Digital. They have people on site when you install these things. They're programmed right there, to whatever the local specs can be. And they can, but that was just one item in there that I'm just going through it real quick. Permitted sign area, 672 square feet, that's a standard. The standard billboard in the industry there's a couple different types, but those signs you see like out on the highway coming into town are 14 by 48 feet in size, the actual sign face. That's 672. That's a standard size in the industry. That's a fine number. The only exception to that would be occasionally you'll get somebody that might have a cowboy hat and part of the hat sticks up above the normal rectangular shape. It's called an extension or a cutout or something, and sometimes we don't always know that those are going to come that way. Like sometimes if you work with a national business, say Boot Barn or somebody like that, that will send you the creative. They'll contract with you to buy a billboard, and they'll send you the art, and it's got an extension on it. We don't always know that's going to happen until after we see the creative. I would suggest that under number 1 there, you allow something that says 20% square footage allowance for extensions. It's probably 1 out of 20 if that happens, but you should, if we limit the size, you should, and that's fine. We're good with the number, but we should have something that says, on a rare occasion, if you do have one that requires an extension, limit it to a percentage of square feet, or just put a number on it.
And you're referring to stagnant signs compared to digital.
Right. Yeah, you wouldn't see that on a digital. It's just, height setbacks. I would suggest there that we just had this clarification in Minot. Fargo has no restrictions as far as setbacks from the property line. Typically, you can go right up to the property line. However, you can only go so high in Fargo, and the closer you go to the hut, it's kind of backwards in my opinion, because the closer you get to the property line or the right-of-way, like say if you were going to do Main Avenue in Fargo, you can be 25 feet tall to the top of the sign. If you go back 10 feet, the farther you go away, you can go taller. And in theory, that makes sense, but anything that's close to the road then becomes almost kind of down in the vision or the field area. Like say if you're in a semi and you're on a side street and you want to turn, it puts you up there. My personal opinion is that's too low, but that's how Fargo has done it. But they don't require any setbacks from roads. The state and feds don't along the highway system. You just can't overhang any of the right-of-way. Putting these in line with the building setback of, let's say, a principal structure. I'm assuming that if you're in a commercial area and your setback, Ed, you could clarify, does that mean if the building setback's 25 feet from the property line, that's where you can't have anything built in that area? I'm trying to understand it.
The minimum requirements, and I don't know if it's specified in this particular part because I haven't looked at it with respect to that, is 10 feet from the right-of-way. That would be the minimum setback that you can do. And that factors in overhang, that you, as long as it doesn't overhang over the right-of-way. So if you wanted to put a digital sign or you wanted to put a billboard that is 15 feet or whatever, you can. The key on the setback issue that we talked about before is that it could not extend any closer than 100 feet from the right-of-way. So you have a definitive building envelope, 10 feet from the right-of-way, from the road, up to 100 feet. You could put it anywhere in there.
Okay. That's fine. Like I said, that, to me, the principal structure, or the front side and yard setback required principal structures, that, I mean, that, I have a question mark here, so that's why I bring that up. 39 feet in height as measured from the elevation of the public, of the road, I assume that would be
Center line.
center line, and it could, if you're building in a ditch, it could be a taller pole. If you're building on a hill, it would have to be a shorter pole.
That's correct. We're trying to have a uniformity with respect to that.
Okay. That works fine, but that, if I go, I'm reading this, and I just know from experience what, on looking at the setback thing, I said, if you're setting back amongst the building setback, then maybe 39 feet maybe isn't tall enough. If you have, it's just one of those things that I observed in doing this.
Well, I would agree. I think that if you're going to put a sign that's, you have the ability to go up potentially 100 feet. You're not going to stick a billboard 100 feet off the right-of-way of a major road, because I don't think your clients are going to be too happy with that.
Well,
so it's kind of like we allowed some discretion there, but in reality, you're going to put it as close as you can to the road, because I think that's obviously that's where you're going to get your impact, and that's what the advertisers are going to want you to have.
Right.
Visibility with respect to the road. However, there may be there may be some reason that you can't do it in that particular area, wetland issue, or just the way the pavement is, the parking, it may already be an established area, and if that's the case, then obviously your billboard would have to be placed farther back, because you don't have the ability to remove a parking space or something to that nature.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we could tighten it up, and I would agree with that. That's why we have the radius of 300 feet to counterbalance the going too far back on placing a billboard, as long as you're not going to encroach within that residential or a park setting. So there's overlying setbacks, and you just have to kind of put them all together to figure out how your building envelope would be.
Yeah, and if let's just say this, that we end up with, when we're all said and done, that there's an ordinance that does allow for off-premise signs in the city of Dickinson, then it would, I guess my position is it'd be nice just to have something that is fairly black and white, not a lot of gray, and this is allowed or this isn't, and this is where, I mean, that's this kind of, because when I go through here, that's kind of what I see. I wanted to go find out where, there's one other thing.
I think it'd probably be safe to say that, based upon the information, I mean, I've been planning for 20 years, so I've been dealing with billboards from day one when I was a planner. I'm familiar with this. This is a lot of information with respect to coming to the Planning Commission, and normally when you go through an ordinance of these, when you're dealing with defined issues of billboards, you have several meetings. So I think it'd be fair to say that you're not going to make a decision today. And this is only one of several that we'll be talking today. So feel free that if you don't have anything, you could submit that to us, and we can get that to the Planning Commission.
I guess the other, without having to go through here, I think at some point it says in here that only the landowner can apply for the permit.
We just need to make sure that the landowner, we'll have an authorization form for that.
Yeah.
That the landowner's aware of that.
Right, and I would think that's a good idea, but I think as it was written, it said that only the landowner could apply for the permit, and
Well, technically, the landowner is the only one that can apply for it. You're the representative. If you provide fraudulent information, we go after you. So,
Yeah.
I mean, it's a technicality. The landowner's the one granting you that ability to do so. So,
Right,
all we're
and-
saying is that we would have an owner's authorization form as
And-
part of the building permit.
Right, and I think if you, I'm gonna guess that if it's done like in the state DOT won't issue a permit on anything along their roads unless you've proven that you actually have a lease with the landowner for the sign to be allowed on the premise, and I'm assuming that this is a similar situation
Yeah,
as
it's
that.
basically the same thing. As you're aware, the state will issue a billboard permit without consulting with the city. All we do is fill out the form that states that it's commercial or industrial, so that they know that it meets that standard or within 500 feet of an existing business. And then they have to apply through the jurisdiction.
Yeah, and there's just under item number 2, under permitting, I guess I'm gonna go to A and B. I think it's a great
Can you
idea.
tell us
Pardon me?
what page?
Oh, page 17?
20?
On page 17 or
Yeah,
20?
well, page 17 of the draft, I think.
Is that under D?
It's under G, permitting, number 2.
Okay.
Hopefully you have that.
Okay, you're right.
I mean, I'll just point some of this out. I, like I said, I do think we're gonna have to send you a written, scenario of this, or go through it line by line, but, I think it's a great idea that you require as a city, if you're gonna allow them, that what's built is an engineered structure, designed to withstand the wind and the loads and stuff like that. I think under item A, that what we build is, if we present you with a engineered stamp drawing of the sign, the footing, I guess, detail is in there. I don't know that A would be required. I guess I've never ran into where we've had to do soil testing. Typically, we're not going that deep, but under B, yeah, I would think that's a great idea. It should be required. I mean, you don't want anything falling down. Under number 5 there, I think there's a conflict between, under that same section of billboard sign shall be valid for 180 days, and I think somewhere else in there, it said that it would expire after a year. Let's see here.
We could check for those two things.
Yep. What was that? On premise? Okay. Yeah, permit expiration on page 20, 3910.90, it's got, if a sign is not constructed in accordance with the approved permit within 12 months of the date of approval, it shall lapse. Under this section, it's, under number 5, it was 180 days, so I don't know if that probably should be
Okay.
cleared up. I don't know if, other than that, I guess I just have a bunch of notes here that I can leave, or, I don't know, Ed, if you take those, or
I
or
can take those.
however you
Or
wanna
if
do
wanna
that.
give it- Do you have copies for everybody on the planning committee?
I don't, but I guess if I need to, I'll get them to you.
Yeah, you could forward them on to me, and then we could forward it on by email, if that's okay with everybody?
That sounds good.
Shall not affect, let's see. Other than that, I guess like I said, we've always been, I guess just in summary, we've always been policed by the city, or not the city, but the county, or not the county, the Federal Highway Administration and the state DOT as far as billboards that are related to, in the Dickinson area. I think everything is on the system, or on the highway system, including the business loop 94 of Ballard. So anything that's been built there over the years has been had to be permitted by the DOT. It hasn't gone unchecked. It hasn't, they've always had to follow through the guidelines that are already out there. I guess from our position, we'd like to see the city, there's been topics of discussion, and I followed this a little bit where somebody said there's 50 billboards in town. They're not exactly all 50 billboards in town. A lot of them are out in the ETZ zones along the highway, that type of a thing. But I was around in the late 70s, early 80s when the first boom was going on, and Dickinson got some of that, and some of those signs that are out there today were installed at that point. The same thing happened in Williston. We went up there and we built, because of the oil boom and the activity and all that, the demand, the need for exposure by the various, advertisers. You have your tourist, people that you've got Medora, you've got, the Dinosaur Museum, you've got the Cowboy Hall of Fame, typically these billboards have always been a really good tool for them to get their exposure. And, if in the late 70s, early 80s, basically the development of the off-premise signs or billboards in Dickinson area were what they were then. And if you look at the footprint of what Dickinson is today, and it could, it could double in size in 10 years. I have no idea what the footprint is going to be. I don't know that you'd want to legislate the ability of not saying you've got new hotel properties here. Typically, they like to be out on the highway saying, Super 8, 2 miles, come, they're trying to promote their wares. The footprint of Dickinson in 10 years could be, I have a clue. I guess I wish I knew. I'd buy some land around town or something, but, Too late, yeah, you're right. I guess if what's out there was good for this late 70s, early 80s, and if you look at the footprint of it today, there's room for expansion. Now, I would rather see you control spacing, size, illumination, and allow the use, because I think there's a demand for it, there's a need for it, and if the city continues to grow, and I haven't been north of town, but somebody told me Kildare will be part of North Williston, or North Dickinson some point with all the growth up along Highway 22. So I would like to see it, be that way. We went to Williston at the same time, and, by 1985, everybody was gone, after you went up to that market and built a few boards. So you don't know. I guess it's one of those things you don't know, but we will submit, based on this draft version, we'll submit some written comments on it line by line. I think that's the only fair way to do it, and then we can hope to, I guess, meet again. So
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Ness.
Yep, thank you.
This time I'd ask if there's someone else who would like to make comments for the next 10 minutes.
Basically, I was limiting me to time. Thank you, Commissioners. My name's Wayne Munson. I am with Indigo Sign Works out of Bismarck. Looking at your on-premise, and I kind of asked to go next so that I switch you up from the billboards to the on-premise. I did have an opportunity to visit a little bit with Stephen yesterday to get some clarifications, and I'm glad to see that you're still looking at some diagrams to depict some of your definitions. I think once those are in place, some of my questions may not be applicable. My first concern goes to page 4 and 5 of the definitions, specifically the difference between a ground sign and a monument sign. And I know they're somewhat similar according to what's written in the code, and Ed, if he's able to put some drawings together for that, I think that'll be clarification for everybody, and that'll be perfect. Same thing with pylon and pole signs. I've been doing this 25 years, and in most city codes, monument and ground are pretty much the same thing, and pylon and pole are pretty much the same thing. When you talk about, on page 5, item number 38, the pylon sign, and as I talked to Stephen yesterday, I got the understanding that that was basically a pole sign, but it had a fancy shroud to kind of cover the structure. Great. When you read the last sentence of that description, the base width of the pylon sign shall not be less than 50% of the sign length. I'm not sure if that should be less or more.
It should be more.
Okay. See, this is going to go fast. I'm going to skip page 8 because that's my biggest concern. When I get to page 12, and Stephen and I talked about this quite a bit yesterday, your current codes versus proposed codes are pretty much the same, the size, square footage, height. We've been working in this community for a long time and really have had no issues with on-premise. When I read, again, the maximum height allowed for the general pole pylon sign, I read it as, you know, you can have a 40 or a 50-foot tall sign respectively. Pole then would be 40 foot and pylon would be 50 foot.
Correct.
Typically, in our industry, that's reversed because you're going to have a single pole that you're going to want to get higher to get your visibility off of the interstate or Highway 22. Your pylon sign with that shrouding then just increases the cost for the customer if that one is allowed to go 50 foot versus the pole sign. So if
the reason for that is we're trying to do an incentive to get away from pole signs.
And
pylon signs are more aesthetically pleasing. We also have in this code, compared to the prior one, a uniform sign code for multi-tenant buildings. Therefore, if they want to have signage, they're going to have to go up higher. Otherwise, the sign per space or cabinet space is going to be less. So it's an incentive issue.
Okay.
To do it that way. That's the reason that we have the height.
It definitely makes it look nicer. I mean, I'm a fan of shrouds and cladding, whichever definition you use. It does make the sign look a lot nicer. One that we just recently did for a strip mall, Plaza 619, I think. I like the way that looks. It's very well decorated. It has some design aspects to it, and it complements the building quite well. Page 8 is going to be every sign guy's heartache when we talk about limiting the timing on an electronic message center's frame by frame. A lot of studies have been done. Texas A&M has done a very extensive study as to the effectiveness versus the danger of an electronic sign. They've not found any correlation between a sign distraction versus accidents. I thought it was interesting when I read the study, only 7% of all crashes, and they listed the tens of thousands of studies that they've done, only 7% of the accidents occurred from issues outside of the cab of the car. Not once was a sign listed as a concern or a reason why the sign or why the accident happened. Deer or pheasant or, you know, those are issues outside the cab. They were listed quite a bit, but never once a sign. And so here in items 10 and 11, you're asking for animated signs or electronic message signs that move or change messages and or display more than once every 5 seconds. 5 seconds are prohibited. If you drive around Dickinson today, most of your signs, and that's how we train the customers, is to change those frames every 1 second. That's not too fast, it's not too slow. It allows a customer, for the square footage that they're allowed to buy and put up, to get enough messages out in front of the traveling public in a safe manner. My opinion is that at 5 seconds, you are going to wait and watch that sign too long, waiting for that next message to come up. And that in itself, I think, is going to create a hazard. I would be a little concerned with that. Again, personal experience. I've been doing this for 25 years. We've Some of my first signs I sold were electronic, and we've been training that 1 second ever since then. Every second. If you look at the sign that Dickinson currently has up by, across the street from the Holiday gas station, those messages change every 1 second. I was up there this morning and timed it.
I have to say, I've noticed when the DOT puts out the temporary informational signs, maybe for a construction project or something, I have found myself staring at those signs, waiting for them to turn, so I know what the full message is.
Yep.
And at 70 miles an hour, I don't get it always.
The federal, act with what the billboard companies do, that is limited at 7 seconds. But you're also at a sign that is 600 and some odd square feet, 14 foot tall, 48 foot wide, and you're able to display one full message up there and get all of your content in a tall enough letter that it can be seen. The taxpayers of Dickinson that are buying these products, they're not able to spend $250,000 to get this billboard size sign that they would like to have. They're willing to spend that $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 to buy a sign that's roughly 4 foot tall, 8 foot wide. And in order to get the messages out there to bring the customers in their front door, they need to change those frames every 1 second or so to try to get 3, 4 frames. It might say, come in and buy. That's 4 frames every second. If it said, come in, and you'd be by the sign to never see what the last one was. And so that's, again, why we've always preached and trained 1 second, it's quick, it gets the message out there, and it's not distracting the drivers. They're not staring at it, waiting for it to change. So, I thank you guys for your time. Like I said, not a lot of questions on our side. We've had a great relationship with you folks and have done a lot of signs in this community over the last few years, and the code is written well. Other than those few little clarifications, we'd appreciate it.
Mr. Munson, if you have any further comments or questions, please feel free to send them to Mr. Croton's office.
I've got Stephen's email. I sent him some
Joseph,
yesterday,
thank you.
some clarifications as how I thought it could read, but I will certainly do that again. Ed, thank you for your comments on pylon versus pole as far as the heights wise and what you're looking for.
We're trying to provide an incentive with respect to that.
Mhm.
When you look at the uniform sign portion of that as well, we have an incentive for that. Instead of just saying you have to do it this way, we'll allow some flexibility. We're trying to get the signs to look similar to instead of just putting up a
Pole.
Unitarian pole, to bring up our standards with respect to signage.
Yep. I would be curious to see your definition between the monument and the pylon side with the shroud. Because with your setback of 10 foot, that's perfect. With your monument sign having a 30-foot sight triangle, we're good with that. You want to make sure you have height at the bottom of the sign in your pylon so that you've got good clear visibility traveling in and out of streets and driveways.
Right.
So I'm assuming your monument is cladding all the way to the ground, filled in, and your pylon has decorative poles. So, yep. Gene, did you have a question? You had your finger up. I wasn't.
Well, one of the comments I had made is that I couldn't tell the difference between pylon and pole, but I guess if you guys all can, I don't need to.
Probably the easiest clarification, Gene, would be, this would be your sign, and then you have your base. It has to be half that size. So this would be your base, this would be your sign for a pylon sign. A pole sign is this. That's the difference between the two.
Yep. And like I said, if your illustrations accompany your code, that'll make it really clear for all of us.
I think what we're going to do is, since we probably won't have that, and I normally don't have sign like development codes specifically referred in the ordinance, so you could adjust them without going through ordinance revisions. I just have sign guidelines, and I'll have that, and we'll have diagrams. I'll talk about the different depictions of that whenever we can get some time to do that.
Sure. I've been involved with the Bismarck Code 4 or 5 years ago, helping them right there is the Mandan one shortly thereafter. We're in the process right now of doing Minot's. So if there's some resource material that we can provide you as well, don't hesitate to call and
If you have some nice graphic depictions you want to donate, I will readily use them, so.
You bet, you bet.
Thank you, Mr. Monson.
Thank you very much.
At this time, if there's anyone else who'd like to make a comment, please feel free to come forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What time do you want to adjourn here?
Well, I
want to
don't
be
know.
respectful.
When you hear the gavel hit the wood.
Okay. All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Or when we run out of coffee.
Okay.
So, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name's Mike Derby. I'm with Dakota Outdoor Advertising. I've made presentations in front of your City Commission and Board of Adjustments. And my family and myself have been involved in the outdoor advertising business since 1965. And I think Mr. Ness did a very good job of highlighting some of the issues, so I'm not going to go over those again. I'll provide what I can in writing. I do have a packet I'd like to hand out that has been very helpful at the previous meetings. It talks about digital outdoor advertising, Federal Highway Administration in regards to safety, and a couple other illumination items. And at this time, I'll just hand these out, Mr. Chairman.
Great. Thank you. Thank you.
Very briefly, and then I have a partner in the business that would like to speak. I guess our goal is just to talk about the role of digital outdoor advertising in the community. And if you're interested in that, the ordinance says billboards are only allowed outside the city limits. And if that's the position you take, then everything else is moot. You know, we can wrestle about size and spacing and things like that, but if you don't allow them, all that goes away. So we want to talk about, and I left that with you, and I'm not going to spend time today, but I guess the goal is for us to present a solid case on why digital outdoor advertising is a benefit to Dickinson. So thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Bob Lewis. I'm an attorney from Rapid City, South Dakota. I'm also a partner with Mike, as he said, in Dakota Outdoor Advertising. I'll be very brief as well, because we are going to submit responses to a detailed response to the proposed ordinance for everyone's review here. But what I wanted to just say very quickly is to give you a little background on why Dakota Outdoor is here. And that is, we submitted a number of permit applications several months ago for two reasons, for a number of billboards. First, there were 9 billboards that are in the extraterritorial jurisdiction that are owned by the Houston family from Dickinson. They've owned them for a long time, and we've proposed to modify and upgrade those and make them more professional. And so we proposed those. All 9 applications for modification were originally denied, and now 4 may or may not have been granted. We're seeing on that, but we wanted to upgrade those 9 and make them much more aesthetically pleasing, professional, and so on like that for the Houston family. They would continue to own them and so on, but those were denied initially. And then we also submitted permit applications for 8 new billboards that are in the city in there, and they were denied as well. And they were denied, all of them were denied on the grounds that your current ordinance prohibits billboards. And we appealed that to the Board of Adjustment. And we think we are on very strong grounds there that your current ordinance does not prohibit billboards, and for various reasons. And we're on very strong grounds there. But what happened is, well, I would tell you, Mr. Corton has issued, and I think you've seen that, an interpretation of the ordinance where he said billboards were prohibited. Well, not only is that an incorrect interpretation if you follow the rules of construction for ordinances, but it's illegal for reasons that I can get into if you would like to know, but it is clearly illegal. It took away a right without going through any of the ordinance requirements to restrict rights and so on like that. And we think we have a very strong grounds to appeal these and prevail in court. But we don't want to do that. What we want to do is we want to work with the city, all officials, and come to some conclusion on this. So I've been working with Matt Coling, and I wish Mr. Coling was here so he could fill you in a little bit more about this. But he requested that we postpone our Board of Adjustment hearing that was set for the 10th, and so we could work out something to everyone's advantage and benefit here. And we agreed to do so. But I want to point out in the packet that Mike just handed out there, if you look at the fourth to last page, we agreed to postpone the Board of Adjustment hearing, even though it really wasn't to our benefit, because to keep things moving is to our benefit, but we wanted to work with the city in this instance. And if you would look at the, towards the bottom of the page, there's an email to me from Mr. Coling. And he says, Bob, and then I would refer you to the second sentence. Pursuant to policy comments from the city commissioners, we anticipate the amended sign code will make some allowances for digital billboards as well as for modification of existing billboards. So Matt has represented to me on the phone and here that the city commissioners have given policy direction that digital billboards will be allowed in the city. And I think that needs to be noticed by this Planning and Zoning Commission that there's been some reference there. Mike spoke at the city commission meeting where this policy guidance was given. I was not there, so I can't say exactly what was there. I did read the newspaper article. I assume that maybe you guys have seen the newspaper article that came out after that. But anyway, I think there was some strong policy guidance given by the city commissioners that digital billboards should be allowed in the city. And one of the reasons Mr. Coling referenced to me, or told me about, was a reason for that from the city commissioner was that digital billboards can be so helpful to the community. Public service announcements. In Rapid City, we just had our first Amber Alert for 2 little kids that were kidnapped from their home. And on every digital billboard in the city, the Amber Alert went out and the kids were found. Now, I can't tell you how helpful those were, but every digital billboard in Rapid City, there was an immediate Amber Alert out. There's all these ways that the digital billboards can help the community, and those are indicated in, they're part of that packet that we passed out here. And we think you should review that and consider that. I would also
Could I interrupt?
Go ahead.
I apologize, but
no problem.
Chairman.
Sure, Mr. Jackson.
You understand that the draft does allow digital billboards?
Sort of. We just heard that they may or may not be allowed in the city. There's an interpretation where they aren't and where they are. But I would refer you to page 15.
Well, I think the clarification you have, Mr. Lewis, is that our zoning code applies to the ETZ, 2 miles outside the city limits.
Correct.
Most of the billboards in question along 94 are outside of our city limits. So Matt's email is correct. He didn't say within the city limits. He just said that we would allow it. So our jurisdiction for the sign code applies to city limits and also 2 miles outside the ETZ.
Yeah,
so his email is correct.
What I'm representing to you is that he represented to me that digital billboards would be allowed in the city. I would refer you to the second to last page of the packet you just got there. And that's another email from Mr. Coling to me. Again, requesting that he says that the Board of Adjustment hearing appears to be unnecessary, so they wouldn't hear our appeal. He says the City Commission is planning to amend the sign code probably within the next 3 weeks. I am anticipating the second reading and final passage of the new sign code will occur at the City Commission meeting on March 3rd. I think that Dakota Outdoor Advertising is going to be pleased with the results of the new sign code and is likely to make some allowance for new digital billboards as well as modifications and improvements to existing billboards. That's part of the representation that was made to me. That it's not a full representation because we've had numerous phone calls over this, but we gave up our right to that Board of Adjustment hearing on the representations that were made there. And we wouldn't have done that if what was being said. But anyway, getting to your point real quick, I'm referring you to page 15. The first line, a digital billboard shall not be located than 1,200 feet from any other digital billboard or within 500 feet of any ground sign. Okay, digital billboards purport to be allowed in this. In fact, a 500 feet requirement that they not be allowed with any ground sign is almost a de facto prohibition, because there's going to be very few instances where a digital billboard will not be within 500 feet of a ground sign. And I've not seen this requirement in any ordinances before. I have seen within 50 feet of a ground sign. That's, for instance, Rapid City's ordinance is 50 feet from a ground sign. And then they also added the comment, wisely, that any ground sign can be put up by a property owner after the billboard is up within 50 feet. So that doesn't, it just makes sense. But, 500 feet, that's such a large distance, it's a de facto prohibition against digital billboards. And there's several instances in this that the ordinance purports to allow digital billboards, but in fact doesn't. In practical effect, it bans them, and that's one of the things here. So.
Okay.
Anyway, that's about all I have to say, but I can answer any questions that you may have. But
Not at this time. We're just taking comments on anything that would enhance this ordinance for the city of Dickinson.
Right, and we do, and as Mike said, we will go through this and make our suggestions. Again, we want to work with the city on this instance. That's why we postponed our hearing in front of the Board of Adjustment and delayed things, so we can work with the city to provide for the benefit of both sides, all parties. We think we can do that, and we intend to do that. But I just wanted to make the Planning and Zoning Commission aware of why we delayed the Board of Adjustment hearing and so on. So,
thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Is there anyone else who would like to make comment on this? We would sure like to hear your comments. Please feel free to come forward. Anyone here in the commission wish to make comment at this time? Mr. Croton?
I'll leave it up to you. I mean, it's been...
I would recommend a continuance of this. I don't think I've got enough information, and I think the desires of the Planning and Zoning Commission have to be, make sure that Mr. Croton understands what everybody here is feeling or desiring. And I personally have told Mr. Croton that several months ago, maybe it was a half year ago, that I received phone calls that, with all due respect, I was respecting his expertise on this, and that I expected him to do the best he could for the city of Dickinson, so that any sign that is put up will not be a detraction or an aversion to any of our citizens in any way, shape, or form to disturb their lives, and that show me the benefit that it's going to do for this city. How is it going to enhance the well-being and the way we live and our skyline? That was my opinion, and I basically am letting Mr. Croton use his expertise on this. I've supported him, and I will continue to.
Mr. Chairman, just
Mr. Jackson.
We don't need to discuss this today, but I'd just like to throw a couple things out from the ordinance that we can all think about it. One was there's a short section on portable signs, and I think we probably have all kinds of portable signs today that are not in compliance. And I know that can be a hot topic, and I just think as we finish this that we should look at that really hard and either decide that we're going to enforce what we have or maybe change the way we've written it. And then the same thing, I saw there was a mention for signs on semi-trucks.
Correct.
And we have a couple of those around town, and same kind of deal. Do we want them or not? And,
Well,
so.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up about the portable signs. Mr. Karski worked hard to try to rid the city of portable signs that had things hanging off them and placed anywhere they wanted. And he also worked hard, and I supported him for the last 20 years. Any special use permit that we've ever done that required a pole, a sign, a tower, we've allowed nothing but minimum lighting. We've never allowed any advertising, any lighting that was not required by the FAA. So you hardly see the towers around town. They're not lit up at night. They're not a distraction. They're a necessity for our communications, but they've been done very nicely. Any other comments?
Mr. Chairman, if I can, just, I think we'll get, obviously, comments back from the billboard or the sign industry with respect to that, and I could provide those comments to you. The three questions that Matt posed as part of the sign ordinance, those are integral for you those are macro questions, and based upon those answers, we'll formulate your recommendation. I mean, they're broad in nature, and I would like to get your opinions. If you can, submit them back to me by email so that at least I could see where you're going as a commission. Because we've got, the original ordinance was pretty similar. We continued the prohibition with respect to billboards. We talked about it way back in the spring and the summer, and now we kept that as part of the proposed one. That being said, City Commission wants to look at the ability to address the dilapidated or disrepaired signs. Okay, fine. We'll discuss that matter. But I think that I need to get a response from you with respect to those three questions, because if you want to allow billboards in the city limits, then that is a completely separate issue, and we need to obviously change how it's been proposed. If you're in favor of not allowing in city limits but have them in the extraterritorial zone, okay, that's one alternative. Or designating specific roads or corridors that you want to do, those issues you can do. But I need to get those comments with respect to that, instead of us presuming that you want to go this direction and then, well, we want to have them here, then we'll rewrite that altogether. So if I could just get your comments, not today, think about it, what you've heard, and then submit back an email to me, letting me know where you stand on those three questions, that would help out.
Thank you, Mr. Corton. Any other comments?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Just for our edification, and maybe we can help, what are the three questions? I've heard them referred to.
I'll repeat them for you.
Okay.
Are we as a city okay with having billboards within our zoning jurisdiction? And that applies to the ETZ and the city limits. Okay, we've already kind of discussed that we would allow, at this point, the proposed one within the ETZ. The question is, do you want to allow them in the city limits and the ETZ, or just say ETZ? So that would be the question I need you to ask. Second one would be, are you, and I'm referring to how he has it, are we okay with having billboards? Where do we want them? And there are a lot of options here. One was anywhere in town, limited to commercial and industrial zoning districts, which would be my preference. You're going to do them in the town. You wouldn't obviously want them in residential. Limited to arterial roads, I-94, Highway 22, Villard, your main corridors, or limited to outside the city limits. So, or whatever variation that you want to. At least give me some comments with respect to that. And the third question, are we okay with having billboards? What kind do we want? Do you want to just have stagnant and not digital? Do you want to have digital and stagnant? I think you need to have both. This represents two issues: remedies to address for non-conforming billboards and putting up a digital sign. So, do you want to have digital signs? Some jurisdictions, normally on your sign code, you'll have stagnant, you'll have billboards, and then you'll have a specific provision that talks about digital billboards. Do you want to allow them? Or do you just want stagnant? Say, we don't want message boards, with respect to that. I think if you're going to allow billboards, you need to allow digital as well. So let's answer those questions as best you can. Give it to us so that we could bring back some additional information at our next meeting. So those are the three questions in essence. And then those are macro questions, and then from there you weed them down to coming up with an ordinance on that. Because what's the point of us drafting up an ordinance that says that you can have billboards within the city limits, and then you come back and say, we don't want them in city limits, then we have to edit it all together. So provide me with comments with respect to that, that would be great. Otherwise, you can just show up at the next meeting, and we'll have another work session with respect to this. So, does that make sense?
It does.
Want to answer any questions you guys do have? I know this is a lot to go through, and a lot of it has to do with preference. You have life safety issues. You can have a study that talks about illumination and do that to distract. Okay, that's one side. But you also have aesthetic issues as well, and you could regulate aesthetics. And it's up to you to decide where you want to go, ultimately as a commission, and then provide a recommendation to the city commission. So.
Real quick, I guess I was going to have the same question on the, it'd be nice to see the 3-question thing. If we could get a copy of that, that'd be great. In your response to Ed's comment, all the billboards that I know of in Dickinson are on the state system. They're on the state system. They have to be in a commercial or industrial zone piece of property. The state would never permit a sign that's in an agricultural zone district. You do have some flexibility in, selecting the routes. I mean, I guess if you throw out Highway 22, I-94, and the business loop, that's the routes. I mean, the city of Minot basically in their new code, they basically defined it as such. They had some other busier roads, 20th Avenue, 16th Street, 35th Street. However, under their new code, they followed the state guidelines or the state system, and those areas were not allowed. But in all aspects, it would be commercial industrial zone, period, because they are on the system. So I would agree that with Ed's, comments that, yeah, they are limited to that way by the state and feds anyway. So we wouldn't look to put one in a residential area anyway. So, thanks.
Motion adjourned. Second? Second. All in favor? Aye. Meeting adjourned.